Hi, it's Mike DelSignore here, Massachusetts criminal defense attorney. In today's video, I want to talk about what a continuance without a finding is. You may hear the term used in court. Maybe your lawyer has told you should take a continuance without a finding. Well, in this video, I'm going to discuss what it means, what it doesn't mean, and why it may or may not be the best way for you to resolve your case. So my name's Michael DelSignore. I handle OUI criminal cases all over Massachusetts. And in today's video, I'm going to discuss the benefits and the negative implications of taking a continuance without a finding. So one of the major problems I see is some people think that a continuance without a finding means that the case is dismissed as if it didn't happen. So there's a vast difference between a dismissal and a continuance without a finding. So when we work our way up sort of the staircase of resolutions in Massachusetts, I'll start with the lightest resolution. That's a dismissal. Next best thing is what they call pretrial probation. It's an agreement with the district attorney. If you stay out of trouble for a certain amount of time, the case will get dropped. And finally, after that is a continuance without a finding, which is an admission to sufficient facts, but it's technically not a conviction of criminal conduct, but it's still an admission. So let me talk about some different types of cases where continuance without a finding may be offered. So first we'll talk about OUI cases. So a continuance without a finding on an OUI is a conviction. The registry is going to suspend your license just as if you were found guilty. So the benefits of the continuance without a finding when it applies to an OUI aren't really that substantial. In other words, you're still going to lose your license for 45 days. You're still going to have an OUI in your record. Technically, you won't have a conviction, so it may have some benefits, such as you still may be able to get a firearm license, or potentially, if you have a license from another state, that CWOF may not count as a conviction. Even the firearm issue right now that's being litigated, so the CWOF could be treated as a conviction. So be very careful about taking a continuance without a finding. Make sure you look into all the other implications. In other words, if you want to own a gun license, research that, check it. The law changes on that. If you want to, if you're not a citizen, usually first OUI doesn't have major implications, but check that. Check with an immigration attorney. There might be something in your background where maybe the CWOF would be an issue. And then if you have a license from another state, you're going to make sure, see how that state's going to treat continuance without a finding. And most states are going to treat it as a conviction. So with an OUI, continuance without a finding is not really a great deal. It's basically you're still taking an admission. It might be the best under the circumstances. I've had a lot of clients, of course, take continuance without a finding. But it might be worth you taking it to trial. Now, if you go to trial, if you're convicted, it's going to be a guilty. A guilty is a conviction. And really the major difference for a CWOF and a guilty is how it's going to show up on our background check. Now, some employers can't see a continuance without a finding if they have the lowest level of access to query records. So now let's talk about how a continuance without a finding may impact you if you have, let's say you have a felony charge and they are offering a continuance without a finding. Well, a CWOF on a felony is not a conviction. Now, if it's a guilty on a felony, that is a conviction. So let's say you're charged with assault and battery with a dangerous weapon. If you accept a CWOF, you're not going to have to take a DNA test because you're not convicted. You haven't received a felony conviction. So in the situation where you have a felony charge, a CWOF could be a good way to resolve the case. There's more benefits and more advantages to taking the CWOF. Let's say you've had prior CWOFs on your record before. Then in that case, it might be worth taking a continuance without a finding if you can't win the case to avoid having a conviction on your record. So there are different benefits and burdens of a conviction. Let's say you have a domestic charge. Now, if you admit to a continuance without a finding, you're likely still going to have to take the batters program. So be very careful before taking a CWOF on a domestic charge. But in some cases, maybe the batters program can be waived. Still, you won't have a conviction. You can seal it earlier. So generally, I would say with charges that are non-driving related, if it's not an OUI, the CWOF can be more beneficial, and you should really think about whether you want to take that or take the chance of a conviction. There are certain offenses, too, where CWOFs are very helpful, like driving negligent operation and leaving the scene of property damage. If you take a CWOF on those charges, you don't lose your license, whereas if you have a guilty, there's a license loss associated with that. Same as driving on a suspended license. Let's say you've had others in the past, they won't dismiss it. A CWOF on a driving on suspended is not going to cost you your license. So before taking CWOF, make sure you do these three things. Talk to your lawyer. Make sure you understand all the implications of a CWOF, what it is, what it isn't. Understand that you are admitting to the charge, so it's not a dismissal. It could show up on background checks depending on who's running the check. And if it's an OUI charge, it is going to count as a subsequent offense, a prior offense, just as any other charge. But, sometimes taking a CWOF is better than risking a conviction. It's just case by case. So what you look at the case, what are the strengths, the weaknesses of the case, what's likely to happen if you go to trial, in terms of the outcome, how much worse would the punishment be after trial? Sometimes you take a case to trial, while there's always the risk of jail time in a lot of cases. If you have little or no record, that might not be a realistic risk. But if you go to trial, you might get other conditions on your probation, such as alcohol-free testing, things like that. Whereas if you resolved it earlier, you would have gotten a lighter punishment. Anyway, if you have questions, feel free to call me, 781-686-5924. My cell phone, call, text anytime. Be glad to discuss what the best resolution of your case is for you, regardless of the charge, and I can explain the process, look at any police report, and give you my thoughts.